Hi, everybody. As I mentioned in class on Thursday, I'll do a quick overview here of the study guide, in a bit more detail than I did on Thursday. This coming Tuesday, just as a reminder in class, we'll be finishing up renewables, and then I will go through the review slides themselves to give you a better sense as to the type of questions I ask, the approach that I ask. And again, as a reminder, those quizzes will be open 24 hours before the exam on Wednesday for you to review. So as I mentioned in class this week, the study guide that you see in front of you here and that I've uploaded to the Exam 1 review module on D2L, TCU Online, is not meant to be a detailed look at every single question, topic, or issue that will be on the exam. But these are certainly the most important ones, at least in terms of being able to apply and understand and comprehend and analyze what we've talked about in class, right? So as we go through this and look at this, as I mentioned on Thursday, you need to understand the main players and their environmental philosophies. So Roosevelt versus Muir, for example. Please make sure you understand the difference between the Anthropocene and the Great Acceleration. The difference between intrinsic and instrumental value, we talked about that. The basic premise of the scientific method, how does it work? In other words, make an observation, come up with an educated guess, which is a hypothesis, do your experimentation, and so on. And there's also a slide in there on induction versus deduction. The basic premise of the scientific method also includes the next point, which is what is the difference between a hypothesis, a theory, and a law. Mentioned briefly accuracy and precision at the end of that lecture, so please know that. Okay, then the big section on population. Obviously, you need to know what the rate of natural increase is, the population growth rate that includes immigration and emigration, doubling time, how you calculate those. I got a question after the class on Thursday about do we need to know the equations? Yes, you do. These are very simple, right? Birth rate minus death rate, doubling time is 70 divided by the growth rate. Those ones I expect you to know. Difference between exponential biotic potential J curves and S curves, the implications of each type of growth, what that means when you begin to approach the carrying capacity, and the factors that make up those that construct of environmental resistance. So we looked at that as well. What is the total fertility rate and why is it important? You need to know that. Okay, so this next one I get questions on all the time, how to apply demographic indices. I'm going to give you a table of data that you haven't seen before. It's going to include these indices of different countries. What is the total fertility rate? What's the infant mortality rate? What's the GDP? And so on. And I'm going to ask you questions about those. In other words, you need to understand what those are relative to developed versus developing countries. Population of the world, population of the US, that's pretty straightforward. 8 structure diagrams, what they mean, what is an expanding population and what is a shrinking population. And then that diagram at the end of chapter 2 that talks about the human dependency on land, right? So the implications of population growing while still keeping 1.5 billion hectares under agriculture. Big section on energy, of course. Please know the difference between a reserve and a resource. The breakdown of global energy sources. You need to know that we rely on fossil fuels for an X percentage of our energy sources. You need to know what the big 3 are, but no specific details there. Unconventional versus conventional reservoir we've talked about, right? Various grades of coal. So please know the difference between lignite, for example, and anthracite in terms of the environmental impacts of those. We talked about US oil production and consumption, global production and consumption. I expect you to know how many billion barrels of oil the world uses each day and how many we use in the US. And then why we both import and export oil. The nuclear fuel cycle, please don't go into huge amounts of detail there, but you do need to know the difference between the front end and the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle. Where and what was Yucca Mountain? What is NIMBY? So we talked briefly about that. And the costs and benefits of using both nuclear power, in fact, all of these technologies, right? The pros and cons. What are oil sands and why are they problematic? We looked at the oil sands in Canada for that. Difference between power and energy, the calculation on how many homes a wind turbine can power. I'm going to expect you to do that. And the different generation of biofuels, which is coming up on Tuesday. So those are the big key things and issues that I expect you to know. I will send out an email once I've posted this video. I will also be available tomorrow throughout the day for, not the whole day, but I'll send you some times that I'm available tomorrow on Zoom if you have any questions. All good. Good luck. You should be just fine.